Myself, along with three friends, have been planning this trip for months. It was all that any of us could talk about. Just four college friends, escaping the city for a few days in the woods to de stress and to have a much needed rest after the finals. We arrived on Friday to a discreet location that wasn't well known, just outside of the woods, and hiked 4 miles to a beautiful riverside that only a few people knew about. The 2 days were perfect drinking, laughing, swimming, and just roasting steaks. But it's on the third day where things started to take a turn for the worst. My friend Kelsey went to collect some wood during the day for a fire. That's when she first saw him. A man in his late 30s stood watching her from a distance. He wore a faded red baseball cap and carried a rifle slung over his shoulder. Initially, she screamed, which caused her two other friends, John and Maya, to run towards her. In response, he raised his hand in a friendly wave and started to walk towards them. "My name's Daniel," he said, with an easy smile. "I saw your smoke. Not many folks come this far back. You guys alright?" He seemed knowledgeable and helpful. He showed John the best place to fish upstream and even offered him some fresh fish. The group invited him to stay for dinner. He seemed to be quiet but polite, telling stories about growing up in the woods. Everyone was enjoying his company, except for me. I felt really uncomfortable and weary of this man, who was a complete stranger. I can't explain it. I just felt something was off. His eyes lingered for too long on Kelsey. Eventually, after what felt like forever, he left. That night, they found fresh boot prints circling their tents while they'd been by the fire. No one had heard anything. The next morning, Daniel returned. "Storm's coming in tomorrow," he warned. "You might want to head out early." He helped reinforce the tarp and then lingered. When Maya offered him a beer, he declined, saying that he didn't drink. But that seemed to contradict one of his stories from the day before, when he said that he was drinking when the story occurred. He just lingered around that entire day, with the three other people not minding it, but only me seeming to be annoyed by this. Eventually I snapped, and for some reason I started to yell at him and tell him he needs to go, as this was a trip planned just for the four of us. Especially since I was trying to make a connection with Kelsey, and he kept talking to her. He played the victim and said that he meant no trouble and would leave us alone, which made my friends get angry with me, calling me heartless. They refused to speak to me for the rest of that night, and then they all slept in the same tent, excluding me from it. I was pissed off, but what could I do? I was tossing and turning all night, debating whether I overreacted or not. That's when I heard footsteps come from outside my tent. They sounded like they were slow and heavy, like a man's footsteps. I was shocked into silence. They kept going round in circles until finally stopping outside the entrance of my tent. It went silent for what seemed like forever, to the point that I generally forgot the person outside was there. That's when, in a split second, the zip was pulled down and a pair of hands reached in and grabbed me. I instantly started to scream as loud as I possibly could, which made John come running out of his tent. I heard a commotion outside as I heard an attack in the man, which made him divert his attention to John. I took this chance and climbed out of the tent to see the most horrifying thing in my life. John was fighting with Daniel. The two girls were standing at the entrance of their tent. The man seemed to be getting the better of John, so I jumped in and started punching him in the side of his head. With both of us attacking, we managed to put him on the floor. Somehow, thankfully, Maya had called the police and we had a signal out there. They had to dispatch a helicopter. When police arrived 40 minutes later on foot, they arrested him and took him away. We all went home after that, and my friends were constantly apologising to me for the entire trip home. But yeah, and that's the story of how I was almost killed during a campout. I was invited by my friend Ryan to come with him, his girlfriend and a friend, in the middle of the forest in the UK. Admittedly, I wasn't a big camper back then, and this was my first experience camping. After weeks of convincing me, I reluctantly accepted, only because his girlfriend's friend was a good looking woman. I know it sounds a little bit sad, but anyway, the long awaited day came. We headed into the forest to camp for 2 days. At first, it seemed to be okay. I packed the food, Ryan packed the alcohol, his girlfriend the barbecue, and her friend the water. We were walking for a few hours until we found a good spot to camp. We set up our tents. It turns out the two girls would share, and I'd share with Ryan. We went out to find some wood to light a fire for later in the night. When we returned, we just talked and drank. Me and the girl, who I'll call Shannon, were getting on great and had so much in common. We ended up kissing that night, which made my friend and his girlfriend Sam happy. We always shared scary stories after we had our dinner by the fire, and we were talking about our future aspirations. After a few hours, we decided to call it quits, but plans had changed. Ryan was going to sleep in the tent with Sam, whilst I slept in the tent with Shannon. This was the highlight of my year until this point, which is admittedly very sad. We went to the tent and just talked for a while, and I won't go into details what happened next. After 1 hour, we decided to go to sleep. After a toss and turn for around 10 minutes, we heard footsteps coming outside the tent. Shannon told me to check out, and me wanting to impress her, put on my shoes and went outside, expecting to find nothing. I stepped outside of the tent and was froze. I was witnessing the most horrifying moment of my life. A man was standing outside Brian's tent. At first he didn't see me, so I dove back in the tent and told her what I saw. She knew I was serious by the expression of pure terror on my face. We whispered about what to do. That's when the footsteps made their way towards our tent. We quickly pretended to be asleep. I thought of a crazy plan. If the zip opened, I would grab onto the man's arms and start screaming to alert Brian. That's what happened. The zip opened, but the man just stared in. Eventually, as I predicted, he started to put his hands into the tent, trying to touch Shannon. That's when I lunged, taking him by surprise, and was pulling him down, whilst we both screamed at the top of our lungs. Ryan heard the commotion and came outside and witnessed what was happening. He grabbed a massive branch and began hitting the man repeatedly. The man let out a series of agonising screams as I felt his resistance slowly begin to weaken. That's when I pushed him outside of the tent to the floor, where both of us started to beat him up. Instead of calling the police, as we had no signal, we all decided to abandon our equipment and run back the way we came, in the dark, with our torches. Eventually, after a long time, we somehow made it back to the car and quickly phoned the police, even though we knew that there was nothing they could do. There was no chances that man was getting caught. The police didn't even attempt to go after the man, which pissed us off, but is what we were expecting. That's how it ended. We never did find out what happened to that man, but we're just thankful to be unharmed. Sadly, it didn't work out between me and Shannon, and Ryan and Sam broke up shortly after this. So yeah, it was literally the worst experience of our lives for multiple reasons.